Okay, problem solving continued. I'm trying to fix the setup so that this is visible and everything looks okay. The contrast of the light, all of that, without making it too complicated. Okay, so just to recap, and again, trying to work these out. So you tell me what you think. When we're solving a problem, we are looking for variables. We're looking for the things that are wrong so we can replace them and fix them, change them, test them. And my contention on the video before was that even if we consider a variable, the problem is this variable really isolated so that it can be considered a unit? So my example was in the case of the slope equation here, y equals x times b plus 2. This is a random equation, doesn't mean anything. Each variable here is independent, right? And the value of x is not influenced at all by the value of y. I'm not saying that y or x don't affect each other. They do. Well, they affect the total, the slope, right? Whatever that might be. But they don't fundamentally change each other, right? As opposed to the interdependent variable paradigm, let's say, that I proposed, which was the fact that variable A affects B and affects C and affects D and affects E. And my case in point was talking about relationships. Right? The reason why relationships are so difficult to problem solve is because every variable affects every other variable, right? The way that they talk, the way that they do things, the way that the other person is, and the closer they get to us intimately, it's harder because, again, if we could just break down each thing and sit down and talk about it, Warren Farrell said something that I thought was very, very key. In the book, and I mentioned it last time too, the Boy Crisis. I have it right here. Right here. Here we go. Again, not to, this is the shameless plug part of the video. My book is going to be coming out. I'm officially an author in Las Vegas next week. And I'm going to be with Warren Farrell. So hopefully I get to talk to him about this. But anyways, his contention was that he says most marriages or most relationships struggle or think they struggle because of money or because of kids and because of sex. Those are usually the things. And what he says no, that's not the issue. The real issue is they struggle because of the way they communicate about money, about children, and about sex. And the reason he says that, he says, look, most of the time we have a hard time not taking things personally, right? And again, not to go in a tangent of personal relationships, I am not an expert. I mean, look at me, right? I'm totally not an expert, right? Single guy, definitely not an expert on that. A lot of failures on that, but I've had time to think about it, right? And so this is just an example of what I think, why I think it's difficult, very difficult, right? Putting a business together, for me, is like easy compared to that. And the reason being is because you have all these variables in a relationship, really in anything, but in a relationship is the clearest example, that everything affects everything else. And that's what I'm trying to say. So that's what we talked about last time, okay? So I wanted to go on. I did a little bit of a tangent, and the reason I'm kind of showing this again is because now I fixed the camera so that this is better seen. And so I talked about the dominoes, which you couldn't really see in the video, and then I talked about Misi or Messi or Misi, which was the McKinsey way. And this is also a book I have over there, where they talk about, okay, let's find the mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive factors, let's say. And my argument was that at a certain level of analysis, all the variables relate to each other all the time. So I was rereading something that I read a few years ago. It's a computation by a mathematician, and it's crazy because somebody put this comment on this group on social media. Why am I looking at this stuff, right? But well, I'm working, so I guess I was looking at it, and he says, well, what do you think that chatbots and Messenger is going to be in 5 or 10 years? I said, 5 and 10 years? Are you kidding me? Like, the kinds of things that can happen in 5 years, let alone 10, are like completely unpredictable. Like, this is not going to happen. And the guy's like, well, you know what? I'm just wondering to see what people think. Well, okay, so would you go on a Facebook group and say to people, what do you guys think the numbers of the lottery are tonight? What kind of data are you going to get from that? And by the way, guessing the numbers on the lottery is a lot easier to predict what's going to happen in 5 years, let alone in 10. So anyways, but the tangent that I was going to go on was a different one, which was, so I was reading about this guy, this mathematician, his name is Michael Berry. Michael Berry, that he wanted to find out what are the kinds of factors you need to take into consideration to be able to predict the trajectory and what would happen if 2 billiard balls hit each other, and then any subsequent impacts from, let's say, other billiard balls in a billiard ball table, okay? So what he said is, well, you could pretty much predict the way that a billiard ball will go in one hit, right? Like the first impact. Now the second impact, it's a little trickier, but you could still kind of do it. But then he says this, I thought that was pretty interesting. He says, by the ninth impact, the ninth concatenating impact, now you have to predict, you have to figure it into your assumptions, into your equation, the gravitational force exerted by a body next to the table, next to the billiard ball table. Maybe there's just one person, or there's more, right? You have to actually account for that. And then he says this, he says by the 56th impact, you have to account for every elementary particle in the universe to be able to calculate. You got to put that into your calculation to be able to predict. Right? In other words, because of the number of variables and the number of different things, different interacting things, they extrapolate. They go very quickly. They multiply very quickly geometrically. Then you need to have more and more data to predict further and further and further out. Right? So that means that you would have to account for. And he puts it this way, which I thought it was brilliant. You have to account for an electron spinning, in the other side of the universe, separated by, 100,000 years, light years of distance to the billiard ball. You have to know where that electron is going to be, because that electron actually has a say or has some kind of influence into what would happen, right? So I said, and billiard balls don't have wheels, and don't have whims, and don't have impulses, and don't have crazy things inside of their head. So much less trying to predict what somebody else is going to do or what's going to happen in 5 years, right? So, and the reason I went on that tangent is because everything is related in a way, and so you can only go a short distance, okay? So that's where I left everybody off, and I said, look, you got to be humble. You got to realize that most of the time when you're trying to diagnose a problem, you're not gonna get it. It's very hard to solve these problems. It's very hard to isolate these variables. Okay, so and then my advice was, if you jump into a one Occam razors solution, look, this is the problem, if we just remove this, then everything will be fine, right? If I find that that better girl, right, and I did that at some point, now I want to say that I'm a little wiser than that, but maybe not too much. If I just find the right person, then everything is going to be fine, right? And that's crazy, because like those are almost impossible. Those variables are very hard to control. You can control your own variables. So it's what I always tell people in, let's say, relationships, but I'm not an expert, so don't listen to me when I talk about this. do not just blame it all on yourself, right? If you blame things on yourself, it's better because now you have something to be able to do, right? You can actually change some things. If you blame it on the other person or on your employee, let's say, now it's talking about a business, or I have something to say about that, or blame it on the campaign, or blame it on the product, or blame it on the team, blame it on the whatever, right? Externally. Well, you can't do anything. You've resigned yourself to not fix the problem. But if you say, look, it's probably my fault, but that means that I can probably do something. So what am I gonna do? Okay, so that's where we left off last time. But that was kind of a letdown, maybe. I'm basically saying that we have no hope, but that's not what I'm saying, really. What I'm saying is that it's harder than it looks, and if you are tempted to find a quick solution, chances are you're wrong. But the reason that you do that, the reason we all do that, is because if we find that easy solution, and usually we find the easy solution that is not easy to fix, so we get stuck in a situation. But at least we know the problem, right? At least we've diagnosed it in our heads, which doesn't help, right? But what we should do is, if we actually going to diagnose the problem, then we should actually go out and try to test some things to ascertain whether it is the problem or not the problem. Okay? All right. Before I go on to this next thing, and which is really the meat of the video, which is Spectrum, and I don't mean the cable or internet company. Okay? I mean like a literal spectrum from one side to the next. Before I do that, I would like to address something. The reason that I put examples from let's say relationships to business to marketing, maybe that's related to strategy, to war, to projects, to politics, to philosophy. It is because all this stuff, and a lot of the stuff that I do, and a lot of the stuff that I like to talk about is works at the strategic level. Okay, at a strategic level, it applies to many things at once. So, but it takes a special kind of, or a different kind of mind to do that. I'm not saying better. People always say, well, Gabe, what you're saying is that this is the better way. No, because strategy is important, but strategy needs tactics, and tactics need other things to eventually be implemented in the world. So it's not that it's better. It's like the zoom out version of it, right? So you can think about it like a map, and for me, that's the best way to think about it. And and this is good. I just discovered something. Okay, so here we go. So, and I think this is what we're doing. Instead of trying to find a problem, instead of saying this is the problem or that is the problem, and then I can't fix it, or all of that, or blaming it on somebody else, at least we solved the problem, right? We feel good about solving the problem, at least in our own head. But we're really not solving the problem. We still have the problem. Instead of doing that, what we need to do is to come up with a map. What we need to do is to figure out, kind of lay out the territory, okay? And why is the map analogy a good one that I just thought of? Because a map can be more or less detailed, okay? So if I give you a life-size map of the United States, that's not a helpful map, right? That map would literally cover all the cities, right? We would be walking with this sheet of paper on top of us, right? That's not a helpful map, right? But if I give you the whole map of the United States in a little, thumbnail like that, well, you can't see, right? So among the useful features of a map, it's the size of it and the zoom in or out part of it. It reminds me of a time, not too long ago. What was it? It was in April. Yeah, in April. April this year, I went to Marrakesh. And I was in Marrakesh, and we were there, and with my girlfriend at the time, and we were trying to figure out what's going on with the cities, because the city was crazy, like complicated, and we got lost the first day. It was crazy. And so we got this map, right? But so we were trying to figure out, okay, so where are we in the map, right? And so we go to the guy in the riad, and the guy in the riad, which is like a riad is like it's a very kind of Muslim style property where you come in, there's a big pool or opening in the middle, and then the rooms are all around like that, and you have different levels, and it's very pretty. And so we go up to the guy, and he's kind of looking at the map with us, and he's like, he does a big circle. He says, "You guys are like over here," and we're like, what do you mean over here? Like where? Like where is the street? Well, it turns out, and later we found out, well, the map that we had didn't have the zoom out. It looked like all these tiny little streets. Marrakech is like crazy. It's like, the Medina, which is where we stayed, is like basically this. So if you think about it, I'm thinking this is how they build the houses. So somebody builds a house, boom, okay, boom, build the house, right? And then if I want to build a house, then I go, well, this guy built a house. I don't have to build that fourth wall, right? I just build 3 more walls, and I use his wall, and we're good, right? Okay, so that's how guys started putting all these houses together. Well, what that creates a bunch of streets that go everywhere. That streets can be like this close to each other. Like it could be like the next street over is like 10 steps, right? Because some of those streets are super narrow, or like narrower. Some of the streets are as narrow as this video. I mean, really, right? And there's donkeys trying to go through. Very interesting. I loved it. I just thought it was a great trip, really. And so what happens is like those streets are very tiny, and they could be really close to each other, but there's no connection. Because like everybody built the houses, and just so nobody thought, okay, let's connect the street. No, so you have to go back out to the main street to connect. Okay? All right. Anyways, going back to the topic of the map. So a map is useful if it's zoomed in. Like I said, one of the features, I'm thinking there are more features of the map than just that, but one of the features of a map is that it gives you enough resolution for you to be able to tell where you're going. So that's a good analogy. I think we just discovered something. Okay, so the next thing, and what I wanted to talk about, the real main topic, is a spectrum. So instead of thinking the problem is criticism. The problem is criticism. We can't be critical. Or the problem is bullying. That's the problem, right? So I drew up a spectrum there. We'll talk about what those are. We'll pick one. Let's pick one, an easy one that we all know. Well, the problem is white. White is the problem. And then somebody else will say, no, well, black is the problem, right? Or the problem is order. You have too much order, right? Well, no, the problem is disorder. You have too much disorder, right? The problem is dogma. You guys being too dogmatic about this. No, the problem is nihilism, right? There are no rules. Free for all, right? Or, the problems are the Republicans, those darn Republicans. They're the problem, right? Or, no, the problems are the Democrats, those darn Democrats, right? Instead of thinking about it this way, right, as in that way or that way, we're going to build a spectrum, okay? So we have this spectrum here. And there's all kinds of different gradations between, and I don't want to get too controversial here in this video, so let's not choose Democrats and Republicans, but let's choose white and black, okay? And so what that gives us is that gives us shades of gray, okay? Not the book, not those kinds of gray, right? So different shades that then we can go, okay, where is our course of action? Where should we go, right? And what I'm thinking is that many times, this line that I just drew here is time. Okay? And what happens is that you might take one of these factors, let's say, black or white, let's say color, okay? And then what happens is that you navigate through time in different ways, right? So that you find, again, the map. I think that's a great analogy. The path. What is the path forward? What is the path to take a step ahead? as opposed to trying to fix the problem. Okay? Because some problems are very hard to fix. Okay? I got into an argument with somebody some time ago, and this person said, look, this is like the fifth argument we have about the same thing, right? And right, you know, it was the fifth argument. But my argument about the argument was, well, you see, some problems don't get fixed with one argument. Some problems don't get fixed with 100 arguments, and you have to be able to work it out. You have to, because the path forward is the path through time, right? So if you have a business and you're trying to figure out, and now, not saying that they're not situations, they're not things. So for example, if your water heater breaks, you don't necessarily have to find a spectrum between calling the plumber and not calling the plumber. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when it comes to multiple interdependent variables that affect each other, it will be very unlikely for you to be able to figure out, oh, here's the problem, let me just remove this. It's fixed. It's all good. Rather, it is a process of finding out where in the spectrum between black or white, between order and disorder, let's take those two, where you need to be. Okay? Because this is the reason why you always have that polarity, those two opposing forces. Because time and reality change, and since they change, they require a new adaptation of whatever is it that we're doing. Now, I don't know how long I've been going, but let me just say one more thing about problem solving. And this is the way that I approach problem solving, not in my relationships, in business, truly. But again, the reason that I keep bringing that up is because we're all familiar with those kinds of issues, and because they're really the hardest. I mean, they're really the hardest, and there's no two ways about it. One more thing. Okay, so the reason why we do this path here, and we're trying to look for where to go. How big does the map have to be, and where? I think we just discovered something else. And where we need to go at a given time. Then we get through this. Okay, so this is what I thought about: the difference between thinking and paying attention. I'm gonna do another video about this. I'll just say it because I just know this deserves a whole another video, but let's just talk about it right now. Thinking and paying attention. So thinking, let me do thinking last. Paying attention is being aware or being on the lookout for the things you don't know. And that is different than thinking. Thinking is sort of like working, and that's why I did this box, working inside of a box. So if I do this, so you see this is a box, and let's say of course this is 100%. Okay? Now if I do this, then now this is crap. I should have done it with a different color, right? Let's see if I can do this. That's kind of reasonable. So now this is 80% and 20%. All right, 80-20, right? So I can approach this problem or this entity, however I divide it, that way. I can do another one here, right? And I can do 80-20, right? And if I do both of those, right, I'm like taking 96% of the problem, right? And I can do another one here, and another one here, another one here, like that, right? And increasingly levels of narrowing down the problem, right? But this inside of a box here, it's what I would call a mopping up operation. It's not original of mine. Thomas Kuhn, great guy. He's a philosopher of science, and I kind of borrowed this because he kind of talks about a paradigm as like this set of things, and then we go to work on them and we start working on each piece, boom, 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 and nailing it down. Okay, so this is good, right? When you talk about 80-20 and I know the guy that wrote the 80-20 sales and marketing book, and all of that. And for example, my mentor, business partner, my co-author of our book, which we'll be releasing next week. Another shameless plug. And the website for that is positiontowinbook.com. It's not live, but I'll put a link. He's interviewed the guy who wrote the original 80-20 book, right? The 80-20 principle book. So I'm familiar with 80-20. I think it's good. I think it's useful. It's something that I always use for clients, right? What is the unequal distribution of results that I can do something that would give me a greater benefit? So there are a lot of businesses that with just a little tweak, you get a really nice return right away because of this effect. But when you're trying to solve a problem, when you're trying to figure out what's wrong, chances are it is not inside of this box. It is in the outside, and I wish I had like a bigger sheet so I can illustrate. But this is all the stuff you don't know. More than that, this is all the stuff you don't know that you don't know, right? Which is more dangerous. But when we pay attention, it's like a special way of paying attention. It's a specific way in which you can pay attention. Then you can start to get glimpses of things. Wow, this is good. Yeah, this deserves another video. You'll get glimpses of things that you were not expecting. Okay, and we call those anomalies. Right? You see that anomaly, and I don't want to bring relationships again, but you see it all the time. Right? The way that somebody makes you feel. Right? Ugh, right? And you can say, well, it's their fault. But before you say it's their fault, think about it. Because maybe if you pay attention, you're about to discover something. Right? If there's an employee that always causing trouble, then you might say, man, if I just got rid of him. But think about it. Maybe it's the position. Maybe it's you would be amazed. You'd be just amazed and dumbfounded at the job descriptions from companies. They're the worst at describing how a company or what a job somebody's supposed to do, okay? And generally, those are haphazard and they have more to do with external factors. Well, this person should be able to do this and this and this and this and this. And you ask them, well, why? Well, because that's what the guy before did, right? Bad answer. We don't do that. Humans are not interchangeable like that. There's too much variety, too much flavor, too much art, okay? So, okay, yeah, this deserves its own video. So I'm gonna make another video about this because I want to talk about anomalies that you need to pay attention to when you're solving a problem, because the anomalies are the key. They are the key. There's a great example at the end of. I'll close the video with this. This is very provocative. At the end of the 20th century, better example. At the end of the 19th, going on to the 20th century, beginning of the 20th century, we pretty much, when I say we, I mean the human race, pretty much had the physics. Physics was like a field that was done, right? We were working each piece, and we were done, right? We were 99% there, right? We had a little piece here, a little something there, But we were dead. We were done. It was over. Okay? Now, what was that little piece? That little piece had to do with an anomaly that was observed, and it had to do with the speed of light. So the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. And so the anomaly was that the speed of light seemed to be constant no matter what happened. And that was a little weird. It was a little strange. Just to give you an example, what happened was, so if you're riding on a train and let's say you hop on the train and the train is not going anywhere, it's static, right? The train is standing still. It hasn't started functioning. And you shine a light, right? And the light just beams out like that, and somebody on the other side measures the speed of the light coming through. It measures that it should measure 186,000 miles per second, right? Because the guy's standing still. Now, if the train starts going forward, right? Let's say at 100 miles per hour, right? Which, I don't know, what is 100 miles per hour divided by 60 divided by 60? I don't know. But you would think that if the train is moving and you shine a light, the speed of light would be 186,000 miles per second plus whatever speed you're traveling. But that's not what happened. The speed of light remained the same. Heck, even if you were traveling backwards, and you know it should be half, or it should be subtracting, right? Because the light is you're going this way and you're measuring this way, right? The speed of light remained constant, and we didn't know what that was. But it was a small thing. We almost got this figured out. It's not a problem. Not a problem. Turns out that little anomaly upended and basically revolutionized physics. And that is the difference between thinking between a box and then going outside the box. But I will say this. Just because you go outside the box, you need to understand that when you go outside the box, you are just going to a little larger box, but you're always inside of a box. Why? Because if you're not inside of a box, then you are nowhere, and you need to be somewhere. There needs to be some kind of presuppositions, right? So paying attention to a business, let's say, means paying attention to things pertinent in your business, right? Maybe your bladder is not part of the business. Maybe it is, but maybe not, right? So there are things inside even outside of the box, if that makes any sense. So I'm gonna make another video about that. So to recap, when solving a problem, it's not this or that. All these little things that we say, oh, it's this employee, is this person, is this thing, or if they didn't do this or they didn't do that. Chances are is this and that. And so to figure it out, like I said in my previous video, be humble. Don't think you got it all figured out. I like to think about the spectrum, and yeah, I'm gonna keep developing this idea of the map, because the idea is to push things forward, to improve just a little bit. And even if, see, like time, it doesn't stop, obviously, right? So even if you decide, even if things are going really bad because you didn't work on them appropriately, because you messed up, you can still find a way back by looking at the spectrum and finding, again, the next path, the next step, the next thing to do, as opposed to trying to figure out how to go from darkness all the way to light. Because it's like taking a shower. That's my favorite example, right? You don't turn the shower, I don't think, or most people don't turn the shower all the way hot or all the way cold. It is somewhere in the middle, and then we test it through time. We go, yeah, until it's just perfect. And perfect then, and goodness, and the sweet spot is not here, and then the bad spot is over there. The sweet spot is kind of somewhere in the middle, but not even in the middle, because it's not just about compromising between black and white. No, it's not about that, because it needs to change depending on the circumstances. It is the sweet spot dependent on the other circumstances, and that's why it needs to be a spectrum. That's why it needs to change. And if you do that, and you start to pay attention to the anomalies, to things that are out there, to maybe your own mistakes, maybe things you need to confront, more than likely, right? And that goes for all of us. That goes for me. I speak as if I were speaking to myself. Then we can start working it out, and then we can say, okay, here's our space, and now I'm going to work in the 80-20 inside of that space as a new step. Not as an arrival, not as a we're here, not as a we've gone from bad to good, but we've made the step forward. And we're mapping out our territory. And we're making progress. We're closer to where we want to get. I think it's good.